Well, welcome to the Hamilton Wood Type and Printing Museum. We're a part of the Two Rivers Historical Society, and this is number 4 in our oral history series. The program itself was done with a grant written by our Assistant Director, Stephanie Carpenter, but the funding that has come from the Wisconsin Arts Board, as well as the state of Wisconsin and the National Endowment for the Arts is what helps us put this on. So thank you for coming this afternoon. We are really fortunate that this has allowed us to do something that was needed, I think, real badly at the museum, and that is recording the voices of the individuals that worked in the factory. Because it's certainly one thing to have all of this wonderful equipment, all these slabs of wood, but the people who operated the equipment are certainly more important. So today we're fortunate enough that Mardell Doubek, the world's best type cutter, is with us this afternoon. I will often tell people that in the tour that I give, and while it's true, I sometimes add that she doesn't have a lot of competition anymore, but you know, Hamilton cut type so late that really outside of Two Rivers, you know, where else was it being done? But anyway, thank you for coming this afternoon. And if we could begin with the history, I would just like to ask you to begin with where you were born.
I was born in Two Creeks, which is a little ways out of town here. In 1942. We lived on a farm. I lived on a farm until I was 18 years old, and then we first moved to town. What else?
So how many in your family?
I have 2 sisters, one older and one younger. And they both live in town here, pretty close to me. So,
did either of them work at Hamilton?
My sister worked, the younger sister worked at Hamilton's for off and on for a couple months here and there. But she never really had a steady job there. She didn't know what she was doing from day to day.
Unlike you, when did you start at Hamilton?
I started in January of 68. I started there. And the reason I started there, we wanted to buy a house. We were living in a 3-room apartment with 2 little babies, and it was just too crowded. So then I said one day during the holidays, my husband didn't even know I was doing this. I went down and went to Hamilton's, and they hired me there, and I started in January 2nd. And I stayed there till, I think, 1995, 96, something like that. I stayed there till. But I didn't always work in the type shop. I started out by Frank Blahnik in the upholstery shop, where I sewed dust covers. Okay.
Where was that in the factory?
That was, well, our place where we worked is, if you knew where the, whatchamacallit was, it was right across from St. Luke's. It was on the 3rd floor.
Oh, so between 17th and 18th?
Yep.
Or further? Okay.
It was right above the guard's office there.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, when you started, did you ask for whatever they had available?
At that time, you had a choice to pick the wood or the metal steel plant.
Okay.
And I would not work in the steel plant because my dad had his fingers cut off in the steel plant. So I was no way I was going in the steel plant.
I think that's a good idea.
So then I went to the wood plant. And then you could pick you wanted to work days or nights. And I said only days because I had a babysitter for the days. So that's how I started working there.
Was Frank then your first boss?
He was my first boss, and I had all nice bosses there. I had Frank Blahnik was one, and then Danny LeClaire was another one of my bosses, and after that was Max Petrashek. So I had really good bosses all the way through.
Oh, nice, nice.
And I did work for a while for Donnie Cunup.
We know him.
That was when work got slacked and they shipped us out to different departments until the work picked up, yeah.
Well, when you started, what did you think of just, you know, the place you worked in? I mean, did you like it right away?
I liked working in the sewing department. That I did like. because I worked with 2 other women there, and we got along really good. We became really good friends after. I mean, we played cards and everything. And like I said, Frank was such a good boss that it was really nice working for him.
Do you remember how long it was from when you started in upholstery to when you moved into the type shop?
It was maybe about a year and a half. Then they picked up so much work in the type shop and they needed help. And then Frank says to me, would you want to work in the type shop? And I thought, I don't know if I really want to. But then when I started in there, I loved it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, when you moved over, someone must have taught you how to do type cutting at the beginning.
John Mosler was my teacher at that time. And
Okay.
he worked, he would like set up the machines until you got used to setting them up. And then after that, you were really on your own then. Because it was all piecework and you worked on your own.
John and you, how many type cutters were working at that time?
We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 machines, and they were all filled up.
Wow.
Well, it was mostly all women working on the machines. I think John Moser was the only man on the machines at the time.
Do you remember any of the names of the other women that you worked with?
There was Grace Kaler worked on one, and then there was a Laverne, but I can't remember her last name. There was Lucille Bruchart, and then there was a Storm that worked on them. And let me see who else. Well, John Mosler. And then there was off and on people working on the other 2 machines. They would work on them. I think even Norbert worked on them for a while there too.
Okay. Was it really loud?
I didn't think it was that loud because of we had the wood floors, you know, and it didn't seem that loud. I mean, I never had a problem with it.
Yeah, but you weren't wearing any ear covering.
Well, we were supposed to, but I never, very seldom I did.
Don, you didn't hear that.
No, I wore it on this side because that's where the people would walk down the aisle so they could see you had the earplug. That one didn't.
When John taught you, did he suggest or say you needed to cut so many a minute or anything like that?
Well, he would tell you how to make your money, you know, how many you had to cut per day and that. So that's what you really did, you know, it depended on the style and what line you were cutting, and if you wanted to make your money, you know.
So if you would have had a choice, for example, of what kind of type to cut that would make you more money, you know, what made it more difficult or what was the easiest part?
Well, you really didn't have a choice. Frank would hand out your orders and that's what you had to cut, what he handed out. And
are the simpler type styles easier to cut?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed in watching you cut is that certain styles of type you actually have to do a second cutting on.
It's second routering to get all into your little points and that so the trimmers have easier to trim it out. Like, say like a W, you have to go into the points, you know, to trim it out.
Because you're using a round tracer.
You're using a round tracer and you're using a bigger tracer to clear the block off, and then you go with a smaller tracer and a smaller router to get into those points.
Do you have an idea as far as, I mean, there's hundreds of patterns back there, but I assume you weren't cutting hundreds of different styles. Certain ones were maybe more common, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, certain patterns. A real common one was 835 style. I mean, that was just like plain. And then we had a JCPenney style that we cut a lot of. And then we cut the reverse that would be right for making those nameplates that they made.
Oh yeah, sure.
We cut a lot of that for the office.
Now, one of the things about the museum is that you're teaching Georgie currently, Norm's daughter, how to cut type, but she is also working a little bit on trimming type and a little bit on shellacking and sanding. But when you were there, those were all different jobs, weren't they?
Right.
Okay. So who was working in the trimming area when you were there?
There was Arnie, Jonas, Wiener Vanarge, Bernice Schwacke, Dave Arts, and then Carol McKinlock came in there to trim too. And she also was running the pantograph too.
Okay. How long did you think it took before you got comfortable on the machine, just to?
No time at all. I mean, I was used to doing a lot of crafts, so I mean, it was like doing craft work and that with your hands and that. So I mean, it was no time at all. I had it down.
So what's the tough part of running the pantograph? or isn't there?
I didn't think there was anything really.
But is the
tough one was this big one.
This one over here.
Yes.
What were you doing on that one?
We cut the big type, like 56 line, 72 line. Yeah, that was a hard one to cut.
I would think that one would have just been hard to push around.
Push around, yeah, because there's no springs or nothing.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So it didn't glide the
way the little ones do, yeah.
Right. You had once told me that, generally speaking, you could cut sometimes 3 letters a minute, but when you had a typeface that was going well, you could go faster than that?
Oh yeah, I think so. All depends on how you had to cut the letter and what letter it was. Say you're cutting an L, you just cut it out a little bit. Like a W, you got to go in and out of them and that. You know, it depends on the letter.
Sure. So the letter O is the easiest one of all?
Oh, I think like an L. Anything that you didn't have the second router in that, you know, so you didn't have to handle it twice.
Sure. Well, now, in the years that you were there was certainly kind of a big change in a sense that type cutting in the end was being done at HWT. Do you recall anything about how that came about? In other words, did they move you there, or did you have to?
They moved us there.
Oh,
one day they just came and told us that the type shop was sold, that a guy from Chicago was buying it, which was Jim Kearns. So we had a choice of either staying there or going into the other different places of the building.
Okay.
But a lot of us did go with the HWT.
So then it was only the type shop that was going over there, correct?
That's right.
Okay. In terms of type itself, I look at the older type and it's a solid block, but newer type has a slot on the underside. Were you doing that at both places, or was that?
Oh, both places. That was a show card number with the
Okay.
slot in, and then we did type for Morgan and sign press.
Okay. So then when you moved over to HWT, was it as good as working for Hamilton?
Yeah, at first it was, but then we had to cut our own wood in that, and we also had to pile it on those racks to make sure that it dried.
Oh, okay.
They hauled the logs in, and then the guys cut the wood, and we had to pile it on racks.
Oh, so there were a lot more things for you
Oh,
to do.
yeah.
Oh,
It wasn't like Hamilton's. They just brought the load up from the basement, and here it is, you know.
yeah. Beyond the department that you were in when you were still at Hamilton and the upholstery, you really weren't involved in the rest of the plant, right?
No.
But you must have gotten to know a number of people throughout the plant anyway, just from seeing them every day, or was it more just your department?
Just our department, because we were on the top floor, so there's nobody that ever really walked through there. And it was at the end of the building, so there was nothing beyond that.
Oh,
so,
right,
yeah.
right. So you were at a dead end when they were in your part of the, okay. Did it get fairly warm in the summer when you were up there?
Nope, because we had windows on the whole one side we could open, and we could see downtown, which was nice because you could cut type and still look out the window and see people walking on the streets and that, you know.
So if nothing else, you had a really good view.
Yeah, we saw the big fire when that corner all burned down.
Oh, okay. Well, then you were at HWT until they closed.
No, I quit there in I think the beginning of 92.
Okay.
I think they ran till 93, something
all
like
right.
that.
So pretty close to the end.
Yeah, pretty close to the end.
How many cutters were there at that point? There must have been less than Hamilton.
There was only Carol, myself. I think there was only like 2 cutters, and then once in a while, Naubert's son would come in, and is it Tom, I think his name was?
Maybe. He's got a lot of them.
Yeah,
So.
I think his name was Tom.
Okay.
But otherwise, and then Dave would help out once in a while cutting, and then and I said, like, Carol, we go trimming then, wherever you need it, you know.
I suppose a smaller place, more.
Yeah, I think there was only maybe 6 or 8 of us there.
Okay. Was Bernice there as a trimmer?
No,
Okay.
Bernice retired when Hamilton's sold out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Dave was the only trimmer that came besides Carol.
So after, I think after HWT closed, it was still maybe, 3 years or more before Jim Van Lannen began, I think, working on the idea of the Wood Type Museum, right? That was mid-90s, Jim?
Yeah, it closed about 94, 95. I started working on it in 98.
Well, so then the doors opened in 99. Did you do anything with the museum when they first opened up?
No,
Okay.
because then I still was working full-time.
Well, I suppose you were getting paid for that job, right? Well, so, now we kind of move forward to your work here. And I know that I would see you once in a while when I started as director, and you were always good about coming in to at least, show us things. But then when Georgie decided to learn type cutting, she relied more on you than her dad to teach her. Do you mind talking just a little bit what it's been like to try and teach somebody type cutting?
Well, the hardest is learning to set up the machine. I think that was George's hardest for her to do.
Was that difficult for you when you were learning, or did it seem more?
Well, at first, you keep moving and think, well, this is never going to set up, and eventually it does, though, you just, it's like tweaking it, to the right.
Sure. And I guess, well, she's got to be getting better, right? But the difference is you're teaching her maybe once a week or something
not
like
even
that,
now.
or once every few weeks, more likely.
Yeah, except when we had that training, that we
Right.
did every week. But otherwise, no, I haven't trained her since, oh God, when was the last time? That was way before Christmas, November, I think it was.
Okay. Well, she seems to be catching on fairly well. But as far as some of the things we've asked you to do since you've come back to help out, there have been some kind of difficult typefaces in the mix. The typeface for Eric Speakerman, I remember. Do you mind just talking about why that was such a difficult typeface to cut?
I think he was impossible almost to, he picked out every little, if there was a little bit of a piece of wood in there that wasn't quite rounded enough or something, or it was really hard to please them. Because we weren't used to, we just cut it and they trim it and then went out. We never had anybody check it over that much. I don't know how many times we did it for them.
More than once, I know that. Well, and number one, he describes himself as a very picky German, and that's not an understatement, But the other thing is, it was not. The type did not fill the block like
That's
many
right.
types did.
Yeah.
The thing that I thought was difficult for you is the fact that when you were cutting for Hamilton, you would be given, let's say, a set of Gothic condensed to cut. Well, you were going to be making a quantity of each, whereas with these smaller sets, you're only making 4 or 5 of each letter in some cases. So I would think that'd be a lot harder, less room for error.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, well, there have been a couple others that we've been working on. But the newest one, I think is kind of unique because it has your name attached to it. But before we get to that, one of the things that I was thinking about is you were saying that Eric was very picky, but even back at Hamilton, was there somebody whose job it was to be the inspector?
Well, Grace Kaler before she would pack the type, but not really, because we very seldom that they threw any out. Even the trimmers, you know, well, if they broke a piece or their knife went over it, well, then we had to remake it. But otherwise, we never really got, that I know of, that we got type back that was cut bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I suppose someone wasn't picking out your type, they would wait till the end to look at it? Would that be right? Okay. All right. Well, so onto the new typeface. It is named Mardell, and I just wondered what you thought about that.
I thought it was very nice. It's very simple, I thought, and that's what I am, a simple, plain, nothing fancy. And I thought it was really neat, and it's easy to cut. Very simple-like.
Okay. Well, and we'll have Mardell here St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. And she was really excited about designing a typeface that we would call Mardell, because she said there are not that many women that typefaces are named after, so she was very happy about it. So I'm glad. But one of the things that I wonder about sometimes is that we've had these conversations about cutting type at Hamilton and the eventual use of it, because printing type, of course, is going to move out into the printing world and then the printed world after that. But I mean, that wasn't anything that you really needed to think too much about. You know, what is the type?
I never knew nothing about printing until I came here. I mean, I never seen it done. You know, we made the type, it was shipped out, that was it.
Well, and so even your job as type cutter, would that have been considered a job just like anybody else's at Hamilton, or higher end? Or, no?
Yeah, I think it would be.
So your status today is much higher. You know, you're the best at it. What do you think about the interest people have in you as a type cutter? Does it seem strange or anything like that?
Well, it's something that very few people seen done. I mean, I don't even know what to say, you know what?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure when you were working at Hamilton, you weren't thinking, someday people will really appreciate this.
I just want to get this order done.
Well, right. You know, your job is your job, and the day ends, and you don't really think about it much after that, I'm sure.
That's right.
Yeah. I do have one question for you. You are the only Mardell that I know. And I was just wondering, do you know where your name came from?
Well, my mother said it came from my 2 grandmas. One was named Margaret and the other was Della. So they put it together for both the grandmas.
Oh, nice,
Yeah.
nice. All right, well, that's a good enough answer for me.
Well, that's what they told me, so that's all I know.
Well, that's all you got to go on. Well, after we are done with the conversation, we'll have Mardell give a little bit of a demonstration on the pantograph so that you can see the work that she's done. And then we also have the press room set up so that people can pull a print if you so choose. We've got one locked up, probably with type that you cut, most likely. But one of the things I wanted to say is thank you, because it's very difficult as a history museum to often get the answers to how things were done. And you've always been really generous with your time. And certainly teaching Georgie means a lot to the museum because in a way you've kind of passed it on to the next person, which is pretty great. So thank you.
Okay.
All right. If anyone in the audience would like to ask Mardell questions, that's a good way to start.
I did not work at Hamilton's. My husband did for a short while. Now my sister worked. She's 70 years old. She made washer and dryers. Now I did see them out there. And then I also see your dental cabinets, baby beds, all that. Is that just something completely separate from whatever you did?
It probably was in a different department. I know the washers and I don't know if they made the washers and the dryers, but I know they made the dryers. Donnie, you would know. They just made the dryers.
I know that she did. She used to do that.
Yeah, that was all
I
before.
looked down there, and I like that first dental cabinet. It's beautiful. But you have baby beds and everything down there.
That was all before I came there.
So just for clarity of those in the back who might not have heard, the woman's question had to do with other products that Hamilton made during their history. And certainly the clothes dryer, the dental cabinets, things like that, which are in our history room, indicate those things. There's a lot of things that compared to wood type are rather strange looking. You know, you see cribs and playpens, so things that most people don't associate with wood type. For really good reasons, but as Mardell said, different departments and different products, and boy, at the end that was over 3-block complex with four working floors.
We had 3 on our, yeah, it must have been 4, maybe even 5
And just 2 shifts?
that I know of.
So,
I don't know if the
if they had a third?
3rd.
Yeah. But you can imagine why one person wouldn't have known what a department a block away was doing. They were quite diverse in what they made. Yes?
Is this a worldwide product? Is your typeface all over the world, or was it just the United States, or just Wisconsin? Who used the type? You said J.C. Penney in that, but I mean, was it like newspapers and magazines?
Oh, I think it was all worldwide. I think.
Yeah, eventually it was. So her question had to do with the extent of Hamilton's type, or maybe type in general. But in one of the reasons we're so proud of the Hamilton history is the fact that beginning in 1880 in what was a rather small town, you've got Hamilton dominating the entire country in terms of wood type by about 1892. So 12 years after starting, they have the country locked up in terms of product. But one of the things that we notice as we look at things in the museum is there is Hebrew type, and while some of that would go no further than say Chicago's Jewish newspapers, I do remember hearing about orders that were going to Tel Aviv or to other countries. So you did have Hamilton type sold outside of the country. We have boxes and boxes of the British pound symbol, which can't be used in too many places in this country. So even though Britain produced their own type, they too were at least an occasional buyer. But I have to say that's something that I can't be real specific on answering. Yes?
When did they start like going to the lead?
Well, in the Western world, Gutenberg cast lead in 1450. So that was more usable. When you think about Gutenberg printing the page of a Bible, one given page is going to need hundreds of vowels and almost as many consonants. So rather than trying to make someone like Mardell cut tiny little type out of wood, it was far easier to cast metal. You could dump it out, cast more, and therefore the metal in essence came first, but wood type really goes back to, I think, Korea or China in about the 8th century or the 9th century. Movable blocks of type.
Steffi's gonna.
Sir.
When a type order came through, given the relative easy versus difficult, were your expectations for how fast you did it change with the type of order? Or did they expect you to crank this out pretty much at the same rate, no matter how easy or difficult it was?
No, you had a rate on it to tell you how much, you know, what you would make on it and that. It was up to you if you want to, if it was a harder pattern, there's no way you could have made as much as an easy pattern. Because there's one sample in there that, it's a 430 pattern that you had to first design it and then you had to outline it without going over that. And it was it took a lot of time to do that. You could probably do only maybe, I would say maybe 100 pieces in a day.
And one of the things that Hamilton did, as they acquired many other makers of type, it would be too difficult to name them by their given name. For example, an antique Tuscan concave condensed would be converted to number 430 or something like that. So when Mardell talks about them, there was no way that you would want to remember the Gothics from the Romans, from the various other styles. So far easier to turn it into numbers. So, yes, sir.
Did you do multiple languages, or did you only do Woodset in English? Was it only the English letters, or did you do all languages, like Hebrew and those sorts of things?
Well, if we had the patterns, we could do anything.
Do you remember cutting Hebrew?
I think we did once or twice that I remember.
But not regularly.
No.
Excuse me, when you look at the 1893 Hamilton World's Fair exhibit, you see a variety of languages, but that doesn't mean they cut them all the time. And I've never seen Japanese patterns, so
No.
I get the feeling that was short-lived. Yes.
Was this only one type of wood that you used? Is it birch or what is it?
Maple, hard maple.
Hard maple? And that's because it was the most level or dense?
What was the hardest? Well, for printing, it was the best wood to print, wasn't it?
Right. End grain maple is not a very porous wood, so it can be polished to a really nice finish. It's not as hard as hickory or oak, for example, but it has a very straight grain and, like I said, very closed pores, so you can polish it a lot. Well, if
There's one more.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure what were your hours? Were you on 8, 10, 12 hours, or
It depends how much, yeah, there was overtime in there.
did you work Saturdays and all that stuff?
Some Saturdays, all depends how many orders we had, and sometimes we were done at, it was mostly 8 hours.
What's the biggest pattern you could make?
I think a 72 line on the big machine. On the other machines, we can make up to 36 line, 48 line.
72 line is approximately 1 foot. Though Hamilton did cut type up to 3 feet high
Yeah,
in
they
their
did.
history.
I never did.
Mardell, who was making up the patterns? Who made the patterns?
Norbert made the pattern, the primary patterns, and then I cut for the rest of the patterns out.
Because that had to be very precise.
Yeah.
The pattern itself. And
Yeah.
that's the most difficult part of the job, I think, as far as getting the pattern ready for use.
Yeah, he had to draw them all out, and then he would cut them out of, what the heck did he cut them out of? Plywood.
Yeah, or birch.
I think it's plywood, most of it.
Okay.
And then he would nail it on a board, and then that would be a 72-line pattern. Then I'd cut a 36-line pattern off of that. And off of the 36-line, I would cut an 18-line.
And, you know, maybe sometimes we assume people know too much. The pantograph can reduce, but not enlarge, correct?
Right.
Okay. So if you had a 72 line, that would allow you to make anything down to 1/3 of that size as a new pattern or as a piece of type.
Type, yep.
Right. If you had a 36-line pattern, can you make a 36-line piece of type?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Will it not proportionately work?
I don't think so.
It's just
Because where would you set the machine at? You have to have a setting on there.
right.
And there's
right.
no
So you'd
full
have to
size.
reduce it something.
Yep.
Correct. Okay. All right.
What's the cycle by you? How many times could you redo printing it, or if I understand it right, making copies when you get done with the type?
Well, thousands and thousands and thousands. Like any piece of furniture, you find that some people can make a chair last through multiple generations. Other people's kids break it tomorrow, you know. So, but you know, that said, in our workshops, we're typically letting people use type that's very commonly 75 to 100 years old. So that's because she's so good at what she does.
I'm not that old.
No, that's sorry. Oh, yes.
My dad worked there for 49 years, treating with the
Really?
cutting. Did you know Edward Stateman?
Nope.
He worked with your boss.
Frank
With
Blahnik?
John Mosler?
With John Mosler or Frank Blahnik?
Planning. He used to work with him.
Oh,
Oh, did he work in the upholstery or in the upholstery shop or in the wood type?
In the wood, he
trimmed?
trained. I
Okay.
can't walk these, I'm trying, sorry.
No, I didn't know him at all.
Well, it's good to know, just because knowing who another trimmer at Hamilton was is
And
always
my
nice
uncle
to add.
used to work, he would sand these pieces of wood.
Mm-hmm.
He had a big picture of him down here one time.
Ah, great.
I guess we threw it away.
Oh, we're a museum, we don't throw anything away.
I must have been got
Oh.
replaced.
Yes,
So, is this kind of like a lost art now? Are there other companies in the U.S. that do what you did?
a few, like two.
So did the lasers take over? The laser
Well, the CNC and the laser certainly took over, but in the end, letterpress printing was already declining in the 60s and nearly dead by 1970. It's very unique that Hamilton continued so much after that. What we're seeing is a great resurgence in people's interest in letterpress. There are very few places that have never stopped doing letterpress. Certainly Hatch Show Print would be just about the only one. But that said, there are 2 or 3 people who are cutting type. But you know, that's really it. And in the end, those people typically come here to get as much as they can out of Hamilton as a way of learning, because for the most part there was no one else in the United States after 1900. So yep, absolutely.
What's the word letterpress mean?
It's very much self-explanatory in that the type is pressed into the paper. So that action is very physical. All of the presses are designed in a way where pressure is applied to inked type and pushed into paper. Well, thank you all, and thank you, Mardell. Thanks for coming. Should we let you give a demonstration on the pantograph?
Okay.
All right.